So a lot of that conversation sort of takes us down the thread of technical debt. It's clearly a significant challenge. You've talked about areas where those things are relatively obvious, should replace, shouldn't replace considerations. But how do you actually go about defining where in your existing infrastructure that debt lies? How do you identify those areas within your system?
Do you want me to take that one, Stephen?
Yeah.
So technical debt, we would term in a not very nice phrase as kludge in your infrastructure, right? And what does that actually mean? So if you think about it, and both Stephen and I have worked in the kind of operator game and aggregation game, and you think that situation on a Friday afternoon where you've deployed something new and it's not quite working. Some users can't get there, they can't get to a certain application. What do? You call your Andys, your Adams, your Stevens and go, I'm in a real pickle because this customer's screaming at me and I need to get something fixed. So we all hop on the box, you get to your command line, you make a few changes, everything works, people move on, right? That there, technical debt, right? Because you've created something that's not been designed, it's not been documented, it's not been recorded. So when you try to do something 2, 3, 4, 5 years later, to that point of Stevens, new application, you've found some value creation you can move to, you try to do it, don't work. Why doesn't it work? No idea. Well, where's the problem? I have no idea where that is. And so that technical debt through the right behavior but the wrong execution has created you a problem downstream. So it's a really valid question, Steve, as to how you find that. It's really, really difficult, and it's about looking forensically at what you've got in your infrastructure. Where it goes back to first principles. What was the strategy? What is the policy? What are the standards? Where's the high-level design document? Where's the low-level design document for every part of your infrastructure? And you who haven't got that documented, you don't know. It's an unknown unknown.
Yeah, I mean, I've typically approached it previously when you look at those kind of service operational life cycles, is that there's kind of almost an inverse bell curve around cost of operations. When something's very, very new, it's kind of unproven, there's limited skills in the market and the ability to support it, and therefore kind of support and working in that area tends to attract a premium. You then get to a stage where it's kind of established and mainstream, it's easy to find people that understand it, it's easy to get that support from the vendor. And then you get to a stage where it moves further through its life cycle, where it's no longer within vendor support, it's edging premium support, and your kind of annual subscriptions just keep edging upwards despite that you haven't changed the tech. And at that point, you're kind of degrading the value of the system because you're paying more to support a thing that isn't giving enhanced capability. And skills are harder to find because new people aren't trained on it, and the old people kind of want to retire or have reached a better stage in their kind of career where they're no longer out working at entry-level rates. And you get this kind of cost factor where if you've accrued that technical debt by not addressing doing proper life cycle management, you just get to the stage where you can't find people that know how it works, you can't afford the ones that you do, and your operating costs are steadily edging upwards on a thing. So therefore you're having to make cost savings in other areas. I think Andrew's point earlier around the network is great. If that thing is still delivering optimal value, that's fantastic. How you do that life cycle management to understand when the cost of maintaining it starts to offset the cost of delivering a new thing, that crossover graph does exist, but what you find is that most organizations do not have a handle on when that event horizon is of this is the point I go into the red on that system, and I'm no longer sweating an asset, I'm growing a liability.
Yeah, and I think I really want to expand on that area of skills as well, because I think the other thing that a lot of organizations miss out on is there's always elements of human behavior in this stuff, right? And there's the old adage, turkeys don't vote for Christmas. So the guys running the stuff today have built some kludges because they wanted to keep the organization working, right? It wasn't malintent, to Andrew's point, right? That engineer who went in and just did a little something and never wrote it down, did it to keep things working. He was doing his job. Now, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years later, he has vague recollections that he did something. He doesn't remember exactly what. He doesn't really remember why. He's certainly not going to send up a flare and go, boss, I'm a little bit worried about this thing I did at 5 o'clock on a Friday night 3 years ago because I can't even remember what I did. What he's going to do is just quietly shuffle that information away in the back of his mind and go, that's okay. I'm sure it won't come back to bite us. So unless you have some sort of an external audit periodically that allows somebody who doesn't have an axe to grind to come in and go, I know everything you did was done with the best of intentions. I also know that by human nature, you're covering up some things that need to be addressed because you don't know where that skill gap, that cost of support, that maintainability issue is. And it's going to come up as a surprise. And that's where the costs suddenly spike. And at that point, you have to spend the money because it's a critical system. You've missed that life cycle opportunity to smoothly migrate and divest that legacy stuff. You're now in a pickle because you depend on that thing. And the only way to keep it working is to pay that guy whatever he wants because that information is in his head. And I've seen this time and time again. And like I said, it's never through ill intent, but the organizations find themselves in that position. And that guy who happens to know how to keep things working now realizes he's at the end of his career. He's only got a couple years left to retirement. What a great opportunity to monetize the situation that he created through nothing other than the best of intentions. A lot of times, the organizations will say, oh, well, getting an external audit isn't necessary because I trust my people. They're doing the right thing for the business. They are, but they're still human. There is a human factor to this that says every once in a while, somebody should come in and check their homework because the best intentions in the world still end up not working out for the best to the greater good every now and again. Not every time, but it does happen. And so to Adam's point, that's where you find that skills pinch quite often, is they've almost intentionally not passed on the knowledge and skills to maintain that legacy tech because they're at a point in their career where it's just not advantageous to them to do it. And without the documentation there, without the design artifacts that somebody else could come in and pick up, well, what do you do other than throw money at the problem?
Perhaps from a people perspective, a good way to find technical debt is to pick a person, pick a system, and tell that person that system's broken and see how they react.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting point. I mean, it's one of the functions that Netflix employs, which, I think is the greatest job in the world. And they call him the Chaos Monkey. And his job is to go around in the Netflix systems and break stuff with no warning, no scheduled windows, nothing like that, simply to see how the team reacts. And anytime that reaction is suboptimal, that team is then brought into a room to go, guys, what did we miss here? What was the trick that we were missing that meant that chaos actually affected you? Because you should have anticipated things happening. So, as you say, you can kind of go through an organization almost function by function and just take that function out for a little bit and go, so what happens? What happens if that guy's not around? Can the rest of the organization deal with it? Very quickly, you start to see where those gaps in documentation lie, and you start to see where, back to that product lifecycle point, maybe you're past the sweet spot because it's too difficult to get external support or to get vendor cover or to get whatever you need to keep things going. And you go, I get it. Now it is definitely time to think about that refresh before we get any further down that inverse bell.
I think one of the things, and this isn't a sales pitch, but one of the things that we've kind of constructed as we've built Infratech is what we call 5 states or enterprise checklist. And when you look at that and what and how it's built, it's really to help organizations stop technical debt in its tracks for everything you do forward, but equally allow you to look backwards at what you've done. So if you kind of look at the 5 states that we have, so we have procure. So when you're procuring something, everyone's really happy. Oh, I've got loads of budget. I'm going to go out and buy a load of new kit. I'm going to put stuff in the cloud. What they're not thinking about is how am I going to deploy it? How am I going to operate it? How am I going to migrate to it? And the one that they all forget is how am I going to divest the existing technology that's already there? And you should start with that checklist before you do anything. And equally, when you're divesting something, you think, okay, I'm divesting. What am I going to buy? How am I going to deploy it? how I'm going to operate it, and how I'm going to migrate to it. So at any point that you start in any of your IT systems from that checklist, it gives you that kind of that methodology that ensures that going forward, you don't start employing and delivering technical debt back into your business. I'll stop. I was told no sales pitches.